Okay, looking at the Waltham Threadmill again. I'm going to try to make some quickish videos, just mainly to communicate with the guy who's coming to pick it up in a couple days. So starting here at the headstock, there's a motor down there, right angle gearbox, another pulley, and then this right angle gearbox, there's a worm and a big worm wheel on the spindle for the headstock. And at this end of the headstock is what kind of looks like a standard lathe change gear setup, except instead of powering a lead screw in the front for threading, it powers a lead screw in the back for threading. So to turn it on, you push this button here, and then the pulley starts turning, but the headstock is not yet turning. You have to actually engage this lever. So once you do that, the headstock starts to turn. And at this point, you're ready, should you have work in here, you're ready to sort of get started. I'll get into what all that means in a minute. But to stop it, you just push that little button there, or if it's turning, you can just disengage this pawl, and then everything stops. The lead screw itself is connected through a dog clutch down right there, and this lever here engages the clutch. So if it's turning, when you look down in there, you can wait till it comes around, and you can just turn it, and then engage the clutch like so. Okay, so now when I push this lever, the headstock is turning, the cutter is turning, and the lead screw is turning. You can tell because of this hand wheel down here, which is rotating very slowly. Sorry, that one over there, that's rotating slowly, hard to see. And that means that this whole carriage, which carries the cutter head, is moving towards the headstock. Although if you go around the back, where the electrics are, you can turn this and you can swap directions for either the cutter motor or for the feed motor. Okay, so if there were work in here now, it would be turning and the cutter is spinning. So if you bring the cutter towards you, towards the work, you'd start cutting a thread. And you stop this and start again and look at the carriage mechanism. Okay, so now we have the carriage, and there's a hand wheel here, which operates just like a standard lathe cross slide. You can see I can wheel the whole carriage back or forward. It's hard to tell that it's moving, but it is, so the cutter is getting closer and closer to the chuck. Disengage everything so it's not spinning. And it has graduated dial on it. There's a little knob in the front that you can loosen that allows you to turn this to set 0. There is a lock for that hand wheel here so that you can't move it, and then what you do is you use this throw out lever to send the whole cutter away and back. So in use, you set a starting point with the cutter just touching the work to get like a scratch pass basically, and then you lock the hand wheel and you use this to pull the cutter into the work, let it do a pass, throw it back out, and then generally you would release the headstock lever, which then lets you just spin the hand wheel. Everything is still engaged, right? All of the gearing is still in place, and you can pull the whole carriage back to the start of the thread, and then you take up whatever backlash there is, and you push the lever back in again, and then it'll take another pass, and you would turn the hand wheel to pull the cutter forward by some amount. The per cut amount can be quite large because obviously it's a rotating cutter that is taking multiple bites per tooth. And the throw out lever over here is what lets you release the cutter at the end of the pass. The cutter head itself is powered by another pulley, surprise, surprise, with another right angle gearbox inside there, And that gearbox is a very complicated arrangement inside, but it's rotating this entire arbor that has the cutter on it. And if you loosen 1, 2, 3 bolts, this whole head rotates to adjust for helix angle. And there's a chart that I have that shows what the helix angle should be for various thread pitches that you're trying to cut. Currently, it just has a roundover cutter on it, which I use to make some of these sort of decorative patterns. But if you have a 60-degree cutter, which is included, you can actually cut threads with it. This whole cutter head also rotates this way to accommodate staying perpendicular to a tapered workpiece when you're cutting tapered threads, which I'll talk about. Okay, so then there's a pretty basic tailstock. This ring tightens it down. You need a Tommy bar to get in there to tighten it. Hand wheel on the end, lock for the spindle on that. The whole thing just slides back and forth. Over here is the hand wheel that rotates the lead screw and moves the whole carriage with it. And you can see that it's in gear right now, so the whole headstock is spinning also. If you're trying to chase an existing thread, for instance, or do something in a situation where you need to match the position of the carriage to an existing thread that's on a workpiece here, this handle actually adjusts the position of the whole lead screw and moves everything slightly in relationship to each other, so that you can find an existing thread. Let's see. Oh, so then there's the stop mechanism. So there's a travel stop at this end in case you're threading away from the headstock. And there's a travel stop over here, which is normally used when you're threading towards the headstock. Let's see if I can demonstrate how this works. So you start it up, put it in gear, everything's turning, and now release clutch and just move I'm moving the carriage towards the travel stop. And if you watch that lever, when I hit the travel stop, there's an over-center mechanism that releases this pawl, releases the lever, and triggers this little finger that pushes its own stop button, which is kind of marvelous. I'm going to release that. Let's see. So, sort of speaking of travel direction, around the back of it, there's 3 separate reset boxes. This plug is for the oil pump, which is right there. I didn't really talk about that, but or maybe I did. I don't know. It's a regular oil pump. It's got its own motor, lubricates the cutting wheel at this nozzle. You basically just dump oil down in here, and there's a sump that feeds the pump. There's nothing in there right now, so I don't run the oil pump, so I don't damage it. But then there's 2 separate plugs back here, one for the cutter and one for the workhead. I'm sorry, this is the workhead cutter, and this is the work in the spindle. And there's a switch here that lets you reverse direction of I don't remember I think this motor, so that would reverse the direction of the headstock. And then there's another similar switch on this side that reverses the direction of the cutter wheel itself, just in case you want to cut in reverse, I guess. And while we're back here, there is a taper bar here, runs the full length of the travel, and you have to loosen these 2 screws and these 2 bolts. Why they're not both bolts, I don't know. And then you can move this taper bar in and out. And then you have to release this nut here on the back, and that allows the whole workhead to travel with the taper bar. It's retained, sort of pushed back against the taper bar by these 2 springs. There's one on either side. This workhead is on its own set of ways here, which you can move in and out to accommodate different sized diameters of work. And these 2 little screws tighten the gib on this side so that it doesn't move when it's in use. But when you're cutting tapers, basically these springs are just sort of pushing the workhead away from the work and up against the taper bar as it travels back and forth. And then when you're done with the taper, you have to tighten that screw down again. Otherwise, the hand wheel won't work. Come back around the front. Finally, there is this, for the travel, there's this complicated, there's a little screw right here and a little screw right there and a pointer in the middle. And when you counter rotate these screws against each other, you are moving a bar that runs like the taper bar, sort of the full length, but underneath the lead screw. The nut for the lead screw is in here, and it has a little pin sticking down at the bottom. And that pin, it rides in a little block that's inside a channel in that bar. So as you adjust these screws, you're sort of moving that bar like this. And as the carriage travels along, that pin will follow the position of the groove in that bar and adjust the pitch of the lead slightly. And I found one note in one of the documents that I have that says that this is to compensate for heat treatment and hardening of the screw. So I certainly have never used it. I have no idea actually what it means, but that's what it says that it does. Okay, so back at the headstock here, there's two hand wheels. This one just turns the headstock. And this one, it's easier if I lock it in place. This one, you loosen it up, and it's the drawbar for collets or for the chuck. The chuck is retained. Let's see, is it free? Almost. I'm afraid that it will fall off. Okay. The chuck is retained by essentially a collet-shaped thing. It's just a pin, collet-shaped post that rides in here. And then also on the taper on the outside of the spindle nose. I believe that it takes W20 collets. That's what I saw someplace. But it is all very nicely made, so the chuck just goes. No, I'm just going to leave that for now. Okay, and then over here on the headstock, finally there is this odd thing, which is actually a 12-position index. There's a ring in here with 12 stops, and you lift this lever and then rotate the gearing, which is pretty much impossible, I think, to do with one hand. But let's see if I push this up. Yep, okay, so you can see that pin, maybe you can see that pin is now free, and as I continue to rotate the gearing, that'll snap back into place. And that lets you do multi-start threads, like this is a 2-start thread form shape thing cut on a piece of tubing. And so anything that divides evenly into 12, you can do that many starts. You do 3, 4, 6, 12, etc. Yeah, so multi-start threads. I kind of think that's it. Yeah, I mean, there's a couple bolts over here that let you loose. There's 2 separate banjos for this gear train down here, and there's some bolts that loosen them so you can rotate them, and then you can take all these gears off. This main gear that engages with the headstock has an extended arbor that it rides on, I guess, so that you can swap gears around so that you're running, flip this around so you're running on this gear instead of the big gear. And there's a chart that tells you how to figure out all of the gearing leads. And then this other banjo allows you to adjust the gear that sits on the final gear that sits on the lead screw. There's oil ports all over the place. There's all these big oil cups, which I had to add because the previous owner, I believe, took them all off and sold them separately. I don't know why. Yeah, so there's all of these oil cups on here. There's oil points in various places. Needs to stay lubricated.